had two birthdays over the weekend. Chair Andrews and Commissioner Kelly. Was it your birthday this weekend as well?
It was.
So we have a tradition of honoring the birthdays for our board members. Given all the money you make from serving this in this capacity,
She brought
those are nice.
cupcakes.
we thought it's the least we could do is to give you a treat.
So happy birthday. And actually we heard that, is it true that Charles is also in April? So there are 3 out of 5 of us that have April birthdays. That's pretty incredible. Thank you, Gina. These are so beautiful. Thank you guys for having a birthday.
Thank you, guys. And thanks for making it a cupcake and not a big piece of cake.
Sweets for two more days.
Oh, man.
All right, the last item is an informational item, and it is the budget development update on fiscal year 2014 and 2015. And Tony and Kimberly.
Well, good afternoon again, Chair Andrews, Commissioners, Executive Director Quinton, Tony Barnes, Budget Officer, and I'm here with
Kimberly Branham, Deputy Director.
We'll be presenting our 14-15 budget development update. So I just want to recap where we've been through the process and what the next steps are going forward to complete the 14-15 budget. So far, we started the process back in November, where staff has drafted the budget and 5-year forecast, and we reviewed work plans with the board. We had Central City Neighborhood Budget Committee review happening through December, January, also more recently in April. We had a PDC budget work session on January 23rd where we reviewed the draft budget in detail and took recommendations before we submitted it then to the city in the city budget office. We submitted the budget on February 3rd. And then most recently we had a council budget work session on April 3rd that discussed the general fund, the overall PDC budget, but also the URA modification proposals, which we'll walk through later in this presentation. So the next steps going forward are finalizing and publishing the proposed budget. Our target date's May 7th. That budget will be presented to City Council acting as PDC's Budget Committee on May 14th. The following evening on May 15th, there'll be a public hearing on the budget held by City Council, and then City Council acting as Budget Committee will approve the budget on May 28th. From there, we submit the budget to the Tax Supervising Conservation Commission to review it in compliance with state budget law. And then June 4th, there will be an update on the council action and any recommended changes we're going to bring forth to you when the budget is up for adoption, up for the TSCC hearing, and then before you for adoption on June 25th. So that's the next steps going forward. Any questions on our process? So our changes that we'll be looking at bringing into the proposed budget that's submitted to City Council in May include many of the things I spoke of during the budget revision item, including the VMC, Veterans Memorial Coliseum project, Convention Center Hotel, the housing set-aside dollars, as well as committed infrastructure projects and loans that need to move into next fiscal year. We'll also be taking another look at refining the administrative materials and services budgets. We'll be looking at additional savings there. We'll be programming our business management fund and enterprise zone funds, looking at the different types of program areas we want to focus those funds at. We'll be looking at implementing reductions in projects or refining the estimates in an interstate URA to fund the additional $20 million for housing over 5 years, as well as looking at the Work and Convention Center exchange of resources between housing and redevelopment. And then finally, incorporating the 14-15 impacts for the URA modification proposal, which is mainly limited to the Willamette urban renewal area.
So to dig in a little bit into how the proposed changes would impact the 14-15 budget, as well as the forecast, we have in front of us a comparison between the budget that you saw in January, which is the top of the table and then what we're bringing forward. So the changes that Tony mentioned explain the differences between the original budget and forecast and the revised budget for 13-14. You'll see the $20 million increase in the housing line item within the 6-year total. So that goes from 22 million to 42 million in interstate for housing, and a reduction in PDC resources of about $12 million. We're currently showing a deficit that will need to either bring resources forward to fill or reduce projects accordingly. So we've begun having conversations with our stakeholders and are hearing from them, and we're also talking to the Office of Management and Finance. So next time you see this, we would anticipate that it would be balanced. The Oregon Convention Center, URA, is a little bit more straightforward. There's a large difference in the 13-14 year between what was the original budget and forecast and what you see here now, so $36 million or so, and that's based on BMC and Convention Center Hotel and the items that Tony mentioned. Within the 5-year forecast, there's just the $6 million difference between housing and the redevelopment priorities. And right now, we have included in the 14-15 budget the full $6 million, and we will be working with stakeholders to program those resources as well. Any questions on those two changes? Okay. So the mayor has proposed a packet of 6 urban renewal area changes, and so we wanted to cover those. They don't have a significant impact in our 14-15 budget other than the Waira change that Tony mentioned, but they do have a significant impact in some cases on the forecast, and so we wanted to talk about that. So the proposal is to reduce or eliminate 4 districts, starting with Airport Way, where we would reduce acreage equal to about 40%. There's no impact to maximum indebtedness, and the resources have already been released to taxing jurisdictions, so that's a reduction in acreage only. Within the River District, we would reduce up to about 30% of assessed value and hope to make that effective in 14-15 through completing the UR 50 form. So we would release taxing jurisdictions to tax revenue to taxing jurisdictions right away. Within the Willamette Industrial Area, the plan is to close that district and release all of the acreage. Within the Education District, we hope to add 35 acres to North Mac in order to support PSU priorities and release the other acreage.
So let me just say quickly, the Airport Way one really has no financial impact at all because we're not collecting taxes that we can't use. What it really does is put the acreage back on the books for us to be able to use it. There's no real financial impact. River District, we've just been continually refining the numbers to make sure that we reduce it as much as we possibly can without impacting our ability to get to maximum debt within the time that we allotted. So it has no effect in terms of the total dollars, has a little bit of an effect in terms of the timing, but it's a really good thing because we can send some money back to the city and to the county earlier. Willamette Industrial, quite frankly, we never issued debt, and we never did a project out of it. It was really created for one particular situation that didn't come to fruition. So that has very little financial effect as well. Education District is the one that has the biggest effect, obviously, and the one that has been getting the most press. I mean, I've become a supporter of it because, frankly, I think it takes a lot of the dollars that would be going into a district over a 30-year period of time and are refocusing them on districts at the Central East Side area and the North Macadam area where we know there is a need, and we know there is a need in a much shorter period of time. So we can put the dollars to work more effectively and sooner by getting there. Staff has had some great discussions with the folks at PSU, and Patrick and I and the mayor met actually with the president Vim Vivel and his administrative person earlier in the week, and staff is we're very close to having an agreement that Vim is comfortable with in terms of making sure that he's getting enough back out of this addition in the North Macadam area for giving up the long term of the district. The other thing that it does, which is pretty interesting when you sit back and look at it, and there's probably a chart, maybe you're going to show it, but if you look at the end of urban renewal as we know it, for almost every single district, it's 2022, 2023, and then you've got this one district that goes for 15 years thereafter, and that's the education district. And you sort of wonder what the thinking will be when you get to that point. You can't run PDC for one little tiny district. I mean, something drastic would have to change anyway, so.
So then as the chair mentioned, Central East Side, the goal is to extend and expand the life of that district. So we would expand it to include at least one of the Milwaukee Light Rail station areas, possibly two, and increase maximum indebtedness by 20%, which is the limit that we have based on statute, and extend it for 5 years. So the last date to issue debt would be fiscal year 22-23. Within North Mac, we would expand it just to include those areas that we would incorporate from the education district and extend the life of North Mac by 5 years to really take advantage of the opportunities in front of us through the development agreement with ZRZ and OHSU. So that wouldn't actually change maximum indebtedness. It would help us access more of the maximum indebtedness that's in place, and that would extend our last date to issue debt.
Yeah, so again, so Central East Side, with the opening of the light rail, there are several real good opportunities there right off the bat to lever more development. And in the North Macadam, I think the important thing for you guys to remember in the long run is that district, unlike many others, the future of it really depends on what and when gets developed. Everything else is big enough, old enough that the engine kind of carries it. But in North Macadam, there is so much undeveloped land, and there are some competing interests, obviously, but we need TIF-producing properties to be developed to get to the level that we need to get to. And the whole reason why we're sitting here not being able to get to it is I think it's a very successful district, but it didn't develop as quickly as anybody thought it was going to. And so there just isn't the tax revenue there that was anticipated. And quite frankly, when they were selling condos for 60% of the original price, that translates into the taxable value of the structures, which means that there's less taxes to collect and less for us. So it's just more or less taking into consideration reality.
So the goal of the overall package is to reduce the impact of urban renewal on the taxing jurisdictions. And you'll see in the chart in front of you that there are two ways that we're looking at that. But on the rightmost column, you'll see the total fiscal impact to taxing jurisdictions, which results in a net benefit to taxing jurisdictions of $158 million in nominal, or about $67 million in present value dollars back to the taxing jurisdictions. And you can see, looking at the columns, that the River District and Waiara and Education District each add to that by putting taxes back, and the Central East Side and North Mac are the areas where PDC will be investing more resources, and so there is an impact to taxing jurisdictions. Below, you'll see the how each of the taxing jurisdictions benefits from the package of changes. So the city should see about $20 million in present value over the 30 years. If we move forward as anticipated, that will mean about $1.8 million to the city in fiscal year 14-15. So finally, next steps. So we're in the process of doing the technical analysis that goes into this. We will be sharing with, bringing to City Council a resolution at which City Council will have the opportunity to express their intent to go forward with this package of changes and to submit the UR 50 form, which would make effective the changes to Waiara and River District for 14-15. And then we will be bringing back to PDC Commission and City Council the official changes this fall. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Okay. As I started off the presentation, as I said before I left the board, I wanted to help see this budget get through, and we still are going to have fun at city council, I think. There'll be some pretty good discussion. But I do believe that if we get this package of changes to the urban renewal districts, that the organization's going to have several years of certainty, as certain as it can be. But in terms of anticipated changes at city council, anticipated changes from an economic standpoint, I think we'll be in a solid position and be able to move forward based on where we know we're going to be. So this is just informational. Any questions or further discussion?
Can I just, before anybody comments, can I just encourage, this is, once again, this information item is coming to you to give you an opportunity to weigh in on the 14-15 budget prior to us going to the city council on May 14th. So we won't be meeting as a board before then. And so either now or between now and then, anything that is about this budget that you know have issues with or want to change or add or comment on, this is really the last remaining period before we get on this path where it becomes not impossible to change things, but it becomes more difficult because we got to coordinate what we present to city council at that point.
Well, as I expressed the other day, curious about what happens with balancing out of the Interstate Avenue and specifically the Bridgeton Trail, because I come from that neighborhood, and that, so I'm under some pressure about that. Other than that, I still don't feel like I can have a big enough picture of all of this. I look at all this and I say to myself, well, what happens 10 years from now to this whole organization? Are there going to be more districts? And who figures that all out?
I think we've done some early thinking on that and presented it to the board a year ago, a little over a year ago, and we still have that work and it still remains a priority of ours. I think we've set it aside temporarily to deal with some of these changes and some of the kind of shorter term strategic changes that the mayor's requested. I think once we get this, as the chair mentioned, once we get this figured out, we can return again to
Go back to long-range planning.
To the longer term planning. And we've recommended to the mayor that after the shorter term strategic decisions are made and the action plans that we've looked at today, that we then really need to look at this. I like to refer to it as a 20-year business plan for the entity, and and with a relatively new mayor, he may have a different perspective on that question. So there is the whole range of options open to city leadership and the board, from it's fine that PDC goes away, when urban renewal ends, or we need to figure out how to make it so that it's a self-sustaining organization and anything in between. So that we will revisit that conversation, and I think those are the fundamental questions. Is PDC really tied to urban renewal, and if urban renewal goes away, PDC goes away, or does PDC have a mission and a purpose that lives on after urban renewal, or even with urban renewal being greatly reduced as a tool?
Okay.
So
Thanks.
So you do. You're part of the conversation.
Yeah.
The board is part of it.
Yeah, I feel like Commissioner Kelly, even though I've been here so many times, this is such a complicated process, and trying to wrap your head around the idea of urban renewal going away and what's the future of PDC, and you see how much we've added back to all of these other districts, and then you really hope that people understand the value of urban renewal at the same time, because without it, none of this money, in my opinion, and from what I've heard, would be going back to these jurisdictions in the first place. So I think it's kind of important to look at that aspect of what urban renewal has done. For all the reasons people don't like it, that's completely fine, but I think we should also pay attention to some of the reasons why it's been positive and good for our city. The other point is some of the projects I have seen year after year, and I know we've really been trying to nail down, some of those projects that they're either going to happen or they're not, and I look forward to maybe in the next couple of years that we really put an end to projects that continue to carry over if it just doesn't seem like they're going to happen. And because if our timeline is getting shorter and shorter, I'd really like us to be able to focus on what we can get done in this time period and put those resources back towards more projects that can bring more money to the city, et cetera. One aspect I spoke about in my briefing that I'd really like to see, and maybe you've had some time to look into, was because there's so much, it's kind of a booming development period, and I know that our social and equity goals are really important. I just want the capacity of emerging businesses and women-owned firms and minority firms to get that support as kind of the construction boom is occurring. So making sure that we have enough in our budget for the organizations like MCIP, for me, is really important. And I haven't had a chance to delve into what that is or what it is that we contribute, but I'd like to make sure that we have a substantial amount of funds in that budget, because I just don't want us to miss opportunities when construction is booming and then the capacity of these firms continues to not capitalize on some of these opportunities.
So we did do, we looked into it a little bit, and I think we want to understand more how we could get those resources and whether we could use general fund or E-zone resources to get that as well, to increase it a little bit.
Yeah, and the last comment I would make, I guess I'd just piggyback a little bit on Tom's comments, and that is I'm really happy to hear that we're going through this public process in the interstate district, because there's a finite amount of money, and even though I support increasing the housing, it has to come from someplace. And it shouldn't be a big surprise to folks that have been looking for things that it's now going someplace else without an open discussion. And I think that will also end up kind of resolving or getting to the question that you're talking about, because it's such a big line item in there in terms of the trail.
Yeah.
So I think at least the two of us in particular would like, I would say the whole board, maybe feedback in terms of how that discussion is going.
Okay, so we have another conversation tomorrow, and then I think we can send something out next week, or I'm looking at
Yeah,
budget.
as we talked about, there's the open question of how much we bring forward. And I don't know that we have a formal analysis and recommendation from OMF. I think that's going to mean a lot in that conversation. And so we'll probably come with some recommendation based on all of this for your consideration. And, I think it's safe to say it's possible to bring more money forward. It's always a question of how much.
Right.
Right. And so I think we need to get OMF to weigh in on that, and then we can make a recommendation on what's prudent and all those good things.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, we've checked in, and it's possible to bring funds forward.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Anything else?
And just in response to Commissioner Dixon's comments, I do think every year we need to do to kind of have the kind of discipline about looking at the projects and not just automatically roll them forward. I do feel like we've kind of done that, but unfortunately the timeline just isn't working out. But Mayor Hales came in, inherited existing work on the Veterans Memorial Coliseum, affirmed that he wanted his staff and OMF to continue to work on that project. So we kept it in the budget there. The post office, you'll see from the River District budget, we reduced significantly the amount of money budgeted over 5 years to that, with reflecting what we believe is an updated view of that. Centennial Mills remains in there as an ongoing obligation. So we're always looking for feedback and questioning, like, why is this in here? I think we're getting better about not simply rolling things over and making sure that they're in there for a reason. I do think something like Veterans Memorial Coliseum, we need to have, this next year really needs to be a year in which we either show that it can happen or maybe we reprogram those funds. But I think we're trying to go through that type of analysis.
I do too.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.